Captain America: Brave New World is an okay movie. It's very middle of the road for the MCU. I know this movie just came to theaters over the weekend, but this will be a spoiler-heavy review. I don't know how to not talk about spoilers, I'm sorry. Let's talk about the movie. Captain America: Brave New World is a decent MCU movie. It's not spectacular, it's not, Guardians or, Infinity War. It's not even, Winter Soldier level good, but it's not, Quantumanium bad. It's not, Ant-Man and the Wasp bad. It's fine. It's a perfectly acceptable movie. The problem, at least for me, is, there's two main problems. One, the marketing ruins the movie. If you've seen the trailers, you know the movie. There's nothing, they leave nothing for the movie. Everything is shown in the first trailer, maybe first two. I'm not exactly sure on when they show a couple of these scenes, but if you've seen the first, two trailers for this movie, you know the entire movie. That kind of takes a lot of the surprise and fun away from it. With that being said, the other major issue, at least for me, is its placement in the release schedule. I'm not one to believe that we haven't had enough of some of these characters, right? I don't think it's been, it hasn't been that long since the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show. I think it's been a little longer than it should be. It's been 4 years, almost exactly. This came out in February of 2025, but the show was March 2021. So, it's been about 4 years, which is a little long. I'm not pretending it's not. But for comparison, the first Avenger came out in 2011, and Winter Soldier came out in 2013 or 2014. I think it was 2014. There's a 3-year difference between the two. So it's not unheard of. It's not it's a huge difference. We did have the writer's strike, so it got pushed by a year. It's not a huge difference. Obviously, one's a TV show compared to a movie, but we're just gonna, a general, this is when they had their last own dedicated thing for this, right? It's not a huge difference. It's only a year. It hasn't been that long since we've seen Captain America in something. For me, I think the issue is that we haven't seen him in anything else either. With Captain America in Phase 1 and Phase 2, it was Captain America, Avengers, and then 2 years later we had Winter Soldier. So it was a much smaller gap, and much less projects. They were only doing, 1 or 2 projects a year. We didn't have as much stuff going on in that time frame between, the Captain America movies then. Where now it's it's only been 1 more year than that gap. However, it's been a ton more projects. They're doing, multiple movies a year, multiple shows a year. And I think that just adds to the feeling that we haven't seen Captain America in a long time. And that I kind of agree with. While I don't think it's been specifically a huge amount of time since we've had Anthony Mackie on screen, I think there's been too much stuff that's happened since we've seen him. When we last left Sam Wilson's character, he just picked up the role of Captain America, and, Endgame was, the stuff from Endgame and the events of Endgame are all over. There's not really a huge thing going on, right? They're picking up the pieces from the blip. That's where we left him. And now, the next time we see him, we are heading into the multiverse saga. Well, we're in the multiverse saga, but we're heading into the end of the multiverse saga. So again, while the amount of time that's passed is actually very similar, the events are so drastic that it feels like we have no idea what his place in any of this is. He doesn't have a role. In the first couple of movies, he was the soldier at a time. He took down Hydra, and he's taking down S.H.I.E.L.D. That kind of stuff. He plays a major role throughout the first saga, throughout the Infinity Saga. But with this time, it doesn't feel like he has that major footing like he was there at the beginning, and now he's kind of sneaking back in at the end to be the guy doing something. Like, he's probably going to reform the Avengers. I think we all know that he's going to reform the Avengers by the time probably Doomsday comes around, maybe Secret Wars. But it doesn't feel like he did anything. Like, it doesn't feel like he's been involved in this story enough. And this film does not fix that problem for me, because it doesn't have anything to do with the multiverse saga at all. And in some ways, that's cool. I don't really hate on the multiverse stuff, as I see a lot of, comic book Twitter does, but I don't want every movie to be like a big multiverse fest. Like, it's perfectly fine to have this be a much more grounded political thriller type movie that it's clearly trying to be, but with like a Red Hulk in it. That would be fine. That would be cool. But you still have to have some connective tissue, even if the connective tissue is just he's aware, he's been made aware that the multiverse thing is happening, and he's reforming the Avengers for it. That would be something, that would be a reason to kind of have this movie. But as it stands, this movie doesn't do anything to the plot of the saga, and doesn't do anything for Sam. Like, it's not like, it's not a main story in the main plot of the MCU right now, which is fine. In the Infinity Saga, we had those movies too. That's okay. They are fun. And this could be that. But it's also not doing that. It's not by itself. It's not a standalone movie that just, bolsters Sam's character or adds to the world building of anything, really. The only thing this movie does is clean up the mess of the original Hulk movie with the leader. Just kind of get that out the way. Gives us Red Hulk, finally, which, Red Hulk's cool. I like Red Hulk. I think it's a good idea to bring him in. It didn't need to be in this movie. And if it's going to be in this movie, you kind of need a reason. I don't feel like there was one. And that's it. That's the whole movie. This is just Falcon and the Winter Soldier 2, I guess, but not really like a sequel. This is like the 9th episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier or something, I guess is the best way to put it. And if you really like that show, you're probably going to like this movie, because it's not a bad movie. There inherently is nothing wrong with this movie. It is perfectly fine as a movie. It is a fun watch. If you like the characters in the movie, which I do, we're going to get to that in a second, but I do really like the characters in this movie, this is all working and it's all fine. But in the context of the larger MCU, which at this point we're at the end of the multiverse saga, right? Like, we're ending this phase with the Thunderbolts, the very next movie. So this is the second to last movie in this phase. And from there, we're going into the next phase, which is Fantastic Four, Doomsday, and Secret Wars. That's all we know going into that phase. That is the end. This is basically setting up for phase 3. And if I think about where we were at this point in phase 2, I mean, technically we were at the Avengers movie, which, Ultron and the Infinity Stones and stuff like that. Same thing with Guardians. At this point, this movie takes place in a similar time frame for that second phase of that saga, where the Avengers movie was, where the second Avengers movie was. It was the second to last movie, and there was one after of, like, the quirky, weird character. In this case, it's the Thunderbolts is kind of taking that role of, like, a post-movie, but also, like, a post-phase movie, whereas before it was Ant-Man. Obviously, these don't connect one-to-one, but in that headspace of, like, how you're ending a phase, this doesn't feel like the end to a phase. This doesn't feel like anything of a phase. This feels like a movie that's in the middle of a phase that no one needs to watch. It's just like an update on the characters, like, right? Like, it's just, hey, this is what Captain America has been doing. This is what Sam Wilson has been doing for the last 4 years. And the answer is hanging around with Joaquin Torres and Isaiah Bradley, which, like, don't get me wrong, the Isaiah Bradley stuff in this movie is the best part of the movie. When we're just focusing on him and Sam's connection, best part of the movie. But we're not doing that for, like, 80% of the movie. Like, that's, like, the setup, and then that's used to kind of push us into this other plot of, like, the treaty and a war with Japan and stuff, and like Celestial Island. That's another thing. It's in the trailer, which again, this is where I kind of have issues with the trailer. The Celestial Island fight is the best fight is like one of the, not the best fight. Actually, it's probably the best fight in the movie. Both Sam and Torres flying all over the place and, you know, attacking these planes, and it's a really cool fight scene. But that was already in the trailer. If that wasn't in the trailer, would have been hype for this. This would have been the hypest scene in the movie. But we've already seen it, and like, not in a like, oh, they've shown some of it in the trailer, but when you watch it in the movie, it's way cooler. No, you've seen the entire relevant part in the trailer, except for one piece, and that one piece takes out what I think is the best character in this movie. It takes out the new Falcon, Joaquin Torres, and he's down for the rest of the movie. And like, it adds some emotional stakes to the movie, I guess, but he's like, him and Sam's connection here is like one of the best parts of the movie. I don't think Anthony Mackie is great on his own, but when you pair him with Isaiah Bradley, when you pair him with Joaquin Torres, it becomes a really interesting dynamic because he's sort of in the middle. So he's learning from Isaiah Bradley, but he's also teaching Joaquin Torres, right? So like, you kind of get that both dynamic from him, and it's fun. That is an interesting thing. But you don't see a lot of that, and then for the final act, they take both of them out of the movie completely. We don't see Isaiah Bradley from like the halfway point on, and after this fight for Celestial Island, we no longer see Joaquin Torres. He's done for the rest of the movie. So the end, and then the ending is just Sam versus the Red Hulk, and it's cool, I guess, but again, we saw this in the trailers, and it's not anything more interesting than what you saw in the trailer. So again, if we hadn't seen this in the trailers, it would be great, but we've already seen it, and there's nothing else in this movie. It's not this like raw political thriller that it's trying to be, and it's not actiony enough to be this action movie that it's trying to be. And it's perfectly okay to be either or both of those things, but you're not doing either well. Like, most of the plot is just, we're doing it because the leader wants us to. That's really it. The leader kind of sucked. I do think he looked good. A lot of people complain about the way he looks. I like the big brain thing coming out. Like, that looked cool. But he kind of sucks. He's not doing anything, like, super interesting, and a lot of it's just, I calculate that there's a percentage of a chance that this is going to happen, so I did it anyway. And it's like, cool, man, I guess. Speaking of wasted villains, we get Giancarlo Esposito as the head of the Serpent Society, Sidewinder. Sidewinder from the Serpent Society, and I guess if you're going to call him the guy from the Serpent, I can't argue with you, but I don't know, man. That doesn't seem like the same character, and there's no other members of the Serpent Society, really, so... Did we get a McDonald's toy for one? For, like, Copperhead or something? That's just not there. There's just no one else. And, like, Esposito's take on this character isn't interesting. Like, at all. This guy is a fantastic actor, right? Incredible stuff. He can be funny, he can be serious, he can do pretty much whatever he wants. He could have been in such a wonderful role in any MCU project, right? Like, this is the kind of casting that you should be eyeing and, like, meticulously picking the perfect role to get as much use out of him as possible. Because he can perform. And you give him this? What is this? This is ass. This is trash. Terrible casting. I would call this terrible casting. This is probably one of MCU's worst castings. Because you're wasting such a good actor who is willing to be in one of these movies on a nothing role that is uninteresting and does not show any of his talents at all. This is a complete waste of a casting. And a waste of a character. This guy doesn't need to be here. I don't know who hates the Serpent Society in If Kevin hates the Serpent Society, I guess, because this is atrocious. Probably the worst part of the movie. Like, they just didn't need to be here. We can forgive that because it's such a small part of the movie that it doesn't actually matter that much unless you care about those two things. Like, if you care about the Serpent Society, this is going to bother you. If you care that they casted Giancarlo Esposito in a shit role, this is going to bother you. But if you're like, whatever, he's in the movie, fine. It doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't change the movie in any way. That is part of the problem, is it doesn't add anything to this movie or take anything away from the movie. It just exists and feels like a waste of a cool concept and a cool actor, but whatever. Back to the main parts of the movie, like, I think Danny Ramirez is doing a great job as Joaquin Torres. He is so much fun to watch. It is really good to see this kind of energy in the MCU again. But they sideline him at the back half of the movie, and he doesn't really get any kind of key role, and that's fine. He is the sidekick right now, and that's acceptable. He can be just a guy around. But I feel like he's a lot more interesting than they are letting him be. And the same thing with Isaiah Bradley. Isaiah Bradley is a lot more interesting than they're allowing him to be. Like, they throw him in jail and forget about him pretty early in the movie. But when he is around, he is a lot of fun. Harrison Ford as Red Hulk is really cool. He's doing a good job as Thaddeus Ross as well, but specifically the Red Hulk stuff is really cool. Like, again, I do like the Red Hulk. I'm happy to see him here. It just doesn't feel necessary, and it doesn't really, like, they showed it in the marketing way too much, so it didn't add anything to the movie for me. It's a middle-of-the-road MCU movie. It's fine. It's definitely worth a watch. I think you're best served going to watch it in theaters. I think that's going to be where it's the most fun. If you throw this on TV, it's probably not going to be super interesting. But it's a decent movie. My biggest problem is they wasted a wonderful casting choice on... They've wasted an incredible actor on a nothing role again, which they've done a couple times, but this is a pretty egregious one for me. And it just doesn't fit where the MCU is right now. The MCU is winding up to a finale of the multiverse saga. This does not add to the multiverse saga in any significant way. This does not add to Sam Wilson's character in any significant way. It does not, put any new players on the board in any significant way, unless you want to count Red Hulk. But again, that could have just been in a different movie. It didn't need to happen here. He's not even in the movie. Like, he's in the movie for the very final battle, and that's it. It's like maybe 10 minutes. Did not need to be here. So with all that in mind, this adds nothing to the movie. I think this needed to be a pre-Avengers movie. This needed to be what it either needed to really push Sam's character in a different direction, even if it just, like, by the end of the movie, it's clear, like, okay, we are going to go set up the Avengers now. Like, we see there's an issue. We learned the multiverse stuff in here. We're going to build the new Avengers. That would have been interesting. But we don't get that. Instead, we get a post-credit scene of him learning about the multiverse issues. So this whole movie just feels like a nothing movie. It feels like it's unimportant and it doesn't matter. And at a time when we haven't seen Captain America in 4 years, we've seen a bunch of new characters introduced and we're barely following up on any of them. And this is one of the almost original characters for the series right now. Like, he was introduced in Phase 2. He's been around for a while. We really should be, kind of building on that, getting that brand recognition out of this, and we're not. So, with all that in mind, I don't think it's a very good movie. I think it's an okay movie. I definitely do think you should watch it, especially if you're, if you like the MCU, like, you're going to enjoy the movie. But if you also like the MCU, I think this is one of those movies that is going to be the complaint points of, why does this exist? Why is this here and not earlier? Or, at the very least, if you wanted it to be here, why doesn't it do a little bit more to set up and I hate to say that, set up the next thing, but it needed to set up the next thing. You've waited so long, or at the very least, it's gone so long since we've seen Captain America. It's been so much that's happened since we've seen Captain America. This movie can't just be Falcon and Winter Soldier episodes, 8, 9, 10, or whatever. This needed to be Sam learning the multiverse stuff and setting up the Avengers for the upcoming Avengers movie. Instead, we spend a whole movie doing absolutely nothing. We get the Red Hulk at the end, and then in a post-credit scene, he learns about the multiverse as a concept. Not even that it's happening. Like, actively happening out there. He has friends who are experiencing these issues right now. And we're not dealing with that. We have this guy who is just smart, saying there is a probability that it's going to happen. It means nothing. It really means nothing. It's a shame, because I really wanted to like this movie more. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully Thunderbolts is better. Bye.